Here he is, former voice of the Kamloops Blazers. One half of the rink I deal with Andrew Wadden, our Canucks reporter, Mr. Jeff Patterson. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm all right. You weren't wrong there. It sounded like you were going to say former voice of the Vancouver Giants.
That's true.
Season 2, so
that's true.
Yeah.
You have them both on your resume.
Mm-hmm. But love a good junior hockey trade deadline, and this has certainly changed over the years. There are 6-year-olds that don't know it yet, but they're going to be the draft choices involved in some of these deals that were consummated over the weekend.
It's incredible that you could trade like 7 or 8 draft picks and 5 players to a team. But you see it in junior hockey. I mean, the trade transactions take up most of the page when you look at them flatly. Jeff, lots to discuss coming out of the Canucks 7-4 loss in Winnipeg against the Jets, the first on this 5-game road trip. Let's start with the goaltending. I mean, if you look at the team stats from last night, Canucks outshoot them, outhit them. They win more faceoffs. They block more shots. They have the same number of takeaways, fewer giveaways, have a power play goal even. But, boy, goaltending matters, huh?
It does. And, look, these guys are trying. They're trying their best, but I think they've found their level now. And that 3-2 Nick Ehlers goal, dreadful start for the Canucks, but they did well to turn the table in the second half of the first period, get to the first intermission in a 2-2 tie, hit reset, and that Ehlers goal wheeling out from behind the net, you just needed a save there. Now, in saying that, neither Tyler Myers nor Oliver Ekman-Larsson seemed terribly interested in taking away time and space from Nick Ehlers, and so it's never just the goaltending because the Canucks continue to give up this incredible number of grade A opportunities. But, yeah, they needed some saves. And look, we can't get past the fact when you give up 7. And that's something they hadn't done all season, guys. They gave up 7, so that was new. I won't say it was fun, but it was new. The crazy thing, is that they gave up 7 and didn't give up a power play goal. Like, if you had told me they were going to get bleached for 7, I would have said, okay, penalty kill, let them down yet again, but it didn't. In fact, the Canucks' discipline was incredible. They didn't take a penalty in the hockey game, so the Jets didn't have a power play, but 6 even-strength goals, and that shorthanded one was a backbreaker, too, because a power play in a 5-4 hockey game where the Canucks had given up too much and had stretches where they weren't very good, power play could have been the difference, and yet they give up the shorthanded goal, and that's becoming commonplace. But you asked about goaltending. I like the call. Like I think it was the right decision to go with Colin Delia and give him an opportunity to pick up where he left off against Colorado. But ultimately, we are seeing that the Canucks are trying to plod along here with depth goaltending. And last year's Thatcher Demko probably bails them out on a lot of these nights and in certain situations. I'm not saying this year's Thatcher Demko because, let's be honest, he was part of the problem when he was playing. But it's now clear for everybody to see that last year's team, the issues were there, but they were masked by incredible all-star goaltending, and this year, mediocre to even sub-par goaltending. It's just not, it's not a blueprint to any sort of success at this level.
What's your sense, Jeff? He's on the trip. What's your sense on when we might see Thatcher Demko?
I hope that this organization, top to bottom, takes a long, hard look at where the Vancouver Canucks are as they head into their 40th game of the season. And there is no impetus to rush him back at this stage. This is pretty much a lost year now. And we saw what happened last year where they played him and they played him into dust. Ultimately, he was injured at the end of last year because they overplayed him. The season is going by the wayside. This is not a playoff team. They have given up the second most goals in the National Hockey League, second only to Anaheim. That is not playoff-type hockey. And so, yes, he's on the road trip. To the best of my knowledge, he hasn't even skated in full gear yet. So I think being on the road trip allows him to be around the team, feel like he's part of the group again. It's sort of the early stages of re-engaging in his season. But when you look at this, they come off the road trip. They've got a couple of home games. Then they have that week off that leads them into the All-Star break. I would say not before the post-All-Star break. Just there's no point in trying to hurry Thatcher Demko back whatsoever. It's not about this year anymore. It's about getting him back up to the level he was a year ago so that you can maximize his value over the final 3 years of this contract. But even if he comes back and regains his form from a year ago, I just think they're too far down the creek this year to salvage this season.
And how they handle this
question?
goaltending, I was going to say, how they handle this goaltending position is very interesting because do they do the responsible thing and wait there? If they think they're still in it, do they, a team that thought they were still in it would probably acquire a veteran backup right now to stem the bleeding. That's not happening either. So again, it just sort of seems like they're in the middle of an answer right now.
Right. And so some would say, hey, this is sort of the stealth tank. Like maybe this is management recognizing that the season's not going anywhere, but why would you give up any sort of asset, even for a veteran stopgap? It wouldn't be a high acquiring price, but what's the point of giving up any sort of asset? You remember, just as COVID hit, Jacob Markstrom was injured. They had run out of goaltenders for a while there, and they were forced to make a couple of trades because they didn't have enough in the organization. That's not the case now, but the Louis Dominguez of the world, why give up an asset? I just don't think that there's a point in doing that for the good of the franchise. You hope that Spencer Martin, that they don't lean on him as much as they did prior to Christmas, and that he can keep them in some games. And Colin Delia had up until yesterday. But I don't think that's the route to go. I guess the message then to the rest of the group is, that's the danger, is that you're sort of sending a message to the rest of the group that the organization recognizes that sort of all hope is gone at this point. But the idea of bringing Thatcher Demko back to be a goaltender and a successful one at this level, like you have to be so free in your mind that you are 100% healthy and that your body is going to react and respond to everything that you ask it to do. And I do wonder if that was part of the problem for Demko at the outset of the season. Had the procedure from the summertime, and I just don't know that he was ever full and free and clear in his mind that he was truly 100%. I mean, he talked, said all the right things, but when push came to shove, he didn't look anything like the all-star goalie of a year ago. And I just wonder, not that they rushed him back there, but I just don't feel like he was ever right at the top of his game. And so I would say take all the time that you need, Thatcher, to make sure that whenever it is that you come back, that there's no risk of re-injuring what's ever taken him out here since December the 1st, and that, he can use the remaining games that he gets over the stretch of the balance of the season just to reacquire that form so that he hits the ground running, getting into the offseason, his training program, and can come back next year back at the level that he was a year ago.
Jeff, that shorthanded goal, and the fact that they continue to lead the league in the shorthanded goals allowed, to me is starting to be such an underlined and highlighted stat because, we want to point blame as to why this team doesn't have defensive structure and all that sort of thing. The shorthanded stat tells me that the players that they have just are not good defensive players, because that's a very instinctual sort of thing. Like you don't play with shorthanded, you don't play the power play with defensive structure anyway, but there just doesn't seem to be any instinct to protect the other side of the ice. Like it's unbelievable that they can't get the save either from the goaltender, on these shorthanded opportunities, but B, that the power play units that are out there, they have no concept that that's even a risk. After being burned as many times, you would think that would be in the back of your mind, and it just doesn't seem to be. I just wonder if this group has zero defensive instincts to them.
Well, it certainly brings into the question the decision-making so often with this hockey club. And I would say that there were two goals yesterday, the 2-0 Kyle Connor goal, where OEL pinched, and he gets trapped, and he's in a state now when he gets caught, he's not able to help the cause on the back check, right? Like, when he's caught, he's caught. And so others have to read and react. The Canucks continue to, Bruce Boudreau wants to be aggressive. He wants his defenseman pinching down to try to keep plays alive in the offensive zone. But when pucks get past that defenseman that pinches, others have to read and react and recognize. And so the Connor goal, and of all people, Kyle Connor, one of the fastest guys in the league, all of a sudden he had separation time, and that was the 2-0 goal. But the shorthanded goal that you talk about, it's Connor Garland. He makes a bad read there and decides to go when there's already a couple of guys in deep and the puck gets past him. But you know what? I was thinking about this yesterday. Like, we've heard from Travis Green and Bruce Boudreau, two coaches that have both recognized that this is not a particularly fast team. And I think that's clear to anybody that watches the Vancouver Canucks. And one of the areas, I think when you think of team speed, you think of getting the puck and going to the attack and burning the defenseman and creating offense. But it cuts both ways. And I think that's an area, guys, on the back check. So the Jets break out shorthanded. It's not about catching up to the puck carrier necessarily, but somebody's got to be able to catch up to Dylan DeMello, who's the trailer on that play. And again, I just didn't think the Canucks, outside of Ilya Mikheyev, they're not a particularly fast team. And so Dylan DeMello was able to jump up into the rush. The drop pass comes to him. Not that he's a known sniper, but he looked pretty good on that shot and scores his second of the year. And we talked about this on Rink Wide yesterday. Can you guys envision a scenario where a Vancouver Canuck defenseman scores a shorthanded goal in the run of play? They don't score at all. But the idea of a Canuck defenseman jumping up into the play and scoring shorthanded, come on. And maybe an empty netter at the end of a game, a 150-foot shot that hits the open goal. But in terms of, the Jets scoring that goal, I just can't see a Vancouver Canuck defenseman scoring that. But I do wonder a little bit about team speed in that regard on the back check, just catching up to the trailer and taking that scoring opportunity away. And I'm not saying guys weren't hustling back, but they couldn't get back quickly enough to negate the opportunity. And that was such a gut punch because, again, this is a power play in the third period, a one-goal game. And this is an area, guys, that I don't think enough people are talking about. And I was looking at this earlier before I joined you. So the first 7 games of the season, the Canucks went 5-2. Their power play was 16%. The next 15-game stretch where they got a little bit of traction and looked like maybe they were going to turn their season, over those 15 games, the power play ran at a league best 34%. Well, in the 15 games since then, power play's back down to 19%, and it's giving up these shorthanded goals. So for a 15-game burst, power play was as good as anything in the league. It won them some games, but really this power play has sort of disappointed over the last 15 games, quite frankly, and the shorthanded goals are adding to that. So if the power play is not carrying them, since Christmas, the power play has scored 3 times and given up 3 goals. It's a net 0 in 6 games since Christmas. That's certainly not going to get it done for the team that is trying to make up ground and stay with the chase pack. And they lived and died. They feasted on that power play sort of for the middle 15 games, but really it's kind of been, and I think teams have recognized, take away Bo Horvat's time and space, his production on the power play is down a little bit. Patterson doesn't have a power play goal. Quinn Hughes doesn't have a power play goal. And if Bo's not scoring at the rate that he was in the early going, then it makes sense that the power play is going to take a little bit of a dip here.
I tried to complete your exercise. I looked at Hughes. He's playing less than a minute per game shorthanded on average. And as you noted, just the 1 goal this year and only 20 for his career. So, stars, moon, sun, everything would have to align to get a shorty from a defenseman. Just before we leave goaltending, and because we brought it up on hashtags, Jeff, Arturs Silovs has rebounded nicely here as the Abbey Canucks have done a marvelous job, really. Carlton has really got that team going now. He's up to a .900 save percentage, a .263 goals against. Those are reasonable numbers in the American Hockey League. He's got a shutout this year. He's got 14 wins to 6 losses, and he'll be 22 in a couple of months. Do you see a world where Silovs could get called up and play a game if Delia and Martin continue to struggle?
I wouldn't do that to him. I just don't think that would be fair. I would think it kind of equates to when they threw Mikey DiPietro in as a junior. The way this team defends, if you wanted to throw him a bone at the end of the season and there was a night where both teams were at home and it was easy logistically and say, hey, we want to recognize all that you have done this year down in Abbotsford. Here's a taste of the National Hockey League. But at that point, I would think Abbotsford hopefully is gearing up for its own playoff run. I would leave Arturs Silovs in the minors. He's 21 years of age. He's absolutely on the track. I mean, we know that Ian Clark liked him, and brought him into the system. He's continued to develop. He's a good news story at the minor league level. And you're right. What Abbotsford's doing, all of a sudden I'm finding Abbotsford almost far more interesting and entertaining than the big league team. But I wouldn't do that to Arturs Silovs just because of what he's likely to, like. Does he want to play in the NHL? Sure. His time will come, though, and I just don't think it's fair to that guy to bring him in and say, here's, we want to reward you. Oh, but your reward is playing behind this defense. I'm just not sure that's fair to him. So,
well, by all accounts, they've got structure down there, and they don't have structure up here, so it would be a very different experience.
And what a comment that is, right? Because more often than not, you hear, it's easier to play in the NHL because teams play by a certain structure, and in the AHL, it's very hard to get teams to play within a given structure. Vice versa here with the two Canuck teams. Okay, on to the Bodog poll question. Given the way the season has unfolded, do you feel sorry for Canucks players, Jeff?
I feel sorry for the goalies sometimes. But overall, no, this is pro sports, and they're being handsomely compensated. I think a lot of these guys need to play better. Quite frankly, I guess could I sit here and say, Horvat probably deserves to have had a little more playoff exposure over his years here. And when you see what he's doing this year, I think that's going to come here. It just won't be in a Canuck uniform, unfortunately. But no, I don't think you sit here. It's pro sports. You got to earn your keep. And quite frankly, this group hasn't been good enough this year. And when we saw them in the playoff bubble, that's what made everybody so excited, that they looked like one of the sexy teams coming out of the bubble. And you thought that they were on the start of something. And clearly that wasn't the case. But I want to see some of these guys get back to the playoffs, because Paterson and Hughes and obviously Horvat, Demko, all performed admirably in the postseason, but you got to earn your way there. And this group as a whole hasn't been good enough. So, no, this isn't a pity party for them. It's frustrating. I understand the Canuck fan base frustration. Do I ever? And I want to cover playoff hockey. I want to cover good hockey. I want this city to get excited about the Vancouver Canucks again. But it's not about sympathy at this point. This is their lot in life right now. And, some of these pieces will be here for a while. Some won't. But whatever, as an organization, they've got to figure it out, and they've got to earn it. Nobody's going to sit here and feel sorry for them. Certainly not their opponents as they carry on this the balance of this tough 5-game road trip.
One of the reasons we asked this question is Elias Pettersson's reaction last night, where he throws his stick on the bench. Are you getting at all concerned that this organization is losing, Petey?
Yeah, I think at some level I have that concern. There was that yesterday in Winnipeg. There was the goal in Calgary not that long ago, where the one when Miller took the easy way out in the line change, but Elias Pettersson gliding on the back check there. And we haven't seen that often from him, but it looked like some real frustration setting in that night as well. I've heard a lot of people say, priority one for the Canucks on July 1st has to be getting Elias Pettersson signed long term. I just don't know what's in it for Elias Pettersson. I guess I do. It'd be a lot of money. But other than that, I don't know why Elias Pettersson and his camp would want to rush into an extension at this point. I think he would be prudent to see some true growth in the organization and some idea that they are going to turn this thing around, because right now it just feels like the whole operation top to bottom. There's just so many signs of dysfunction with the group, and I don't want to get deep in the season ticket holders thing on Saturday, but that looked dysfunctional. That just kind of felt par for the course with this organization and where it is. And I don't know that impacts Elias Pettersson signing long term, but they've got to button this down. They can't continue to have any of these missteps at any level, most notably on the ice, though. And so if you're Elias Pettersson, I would think that, rather than locking yourself into something, why wouldn't you want to see some indication that this management, what are they going to do with these big moves, whether it's Horvat, whether it's Besser, beyond that, what does it yield for the organization? What kind of pieces are they getting in return? And at that point, you're Elias Pettersson, maybe then you size up the idea of sticking around long term, because he's going to get paid. It's not like he's going to be out of work. He'll get paid, but I would think at some point, this is a competitive guy that has watched Bo Horvat struggle through all these years without the playoffs. So I would think Elias Pettersson wants a chance to be a winner at some point here. And I don't know. I need to see signs from the organization that they can make that happen for him.
The sad thing is we are not even, and it happens later this week, at the halfway mark of this season. And as you said, this looks like a lost season. And guys, the math is really simple. We've referenced the last time this team was in a normal playoff series, outside of a bubble where they took a backdoor to get into the quote-unquote playoffs. So if this is the lost season, if we're ready to commit to that, I think 98% of the fan base and media would agree with your statement. Next year is the 23-24 season. If they don't make it, they're facing, it's a decade. It's a decade without regular playoffs for this organization. And when you get to that point, a blank decade, boy, is that stark.
Right, and I would take it a step further for all of this talk in the market about how much the owner truly covets, playoff home dates, you're right, Blake. It would be a decade since Vancouver Canucks fans have had a chance to purchase and attend playoff hockey at Rogers Arena. So this idea the market can't stomach a rebuild is that ship to me has sailed so long ago.
It's so wrong.
There's been so many opportunities to rebuild that they have bypassed and taken the shortcuts. But to go since 2015, Bo Horvat's rookie season, where they were the higher seed against the Calgary Flames and couldn't get that job done. And then, you're right, the playoff bubble where they got invited to an expanded tournament. That's it. And so, yeah, it's not looking like playoffs now. Then it puts the pressure on this group to be better to get into the playoffs in the spring of 2024. And if that doesn't happen, 10 full years. And that's assuming that it happens in 2025, and there's no guarantee about that.
It's the one market where the fans have been more patient than management and ownership. It's the one market where the fans have known better than management and ownership. And you tell me, Blake, how they get to the playoffs next year, unless you see Vasily, Nils Höglander, Nils Åman all becoming much better players than they are right now. You tell me how they get to the playoffs next year, minus Bo Horvat, minus Andrei Kuzmenko.
Well, guys,
like
there's
very few routes to the playoffs. You're probably worse next year compared to where you are this
spring correctly. They don't make the playoffs next year. Like if they do this correctly and liquidate the players that they should, they won't be a playoff team next year.
No. Lastly, Jeff, and thank you for that. How about Bo Horvat as a Seattle Kraken? Boy, talk about the indignity, huh? Could you imagine if the Seattle Kraken in their second year, 1 year off a wretched expansion season, the would-be natural geographic rival of the Vancouver Canucks, who have never beaten the Canucks, trade for their captain in a playoff push? Oh,
I like it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about landing spots for Bo Horvat, and I think every team in the league should be in on this guy. Whether they can afford him beyond this year, but, at 5.5 and what's left on that contract for the remainder of this season as a rental and just the way he's going. And look, I hope he scores in Pittsburgh because that would be 30 goals in 40 games. And I just, at this point, these are the things we have to look for as long as he's still wearing a Canuck uniform. So another big-time snipe from him yesterday in Winnipeg. But you want to heat up the Kraken-Vancouver rivalry a little bit? That would get people's blood boiling, certainly. But, the Canucks have, they just have to look at doing what's best for the organization. And I just don't see any way. Yes, maybe they double back one last time. Apparently Pat Morris is coming out here for the top prospects game at the end of the month. There might be one last chance to get together in a room. A lot was made of the fact that they didn't seem to get together when the Hall of Fame weekend, the Canucks management group was all in Toronto for Hall of Fame weekend, but maybe one last chance. But just the way Bo is going here, and if the Canucks have made this offer about, they don't want to go beyond JT Miller's deal, then you can understand why the Horvat camp, there's suggestions out there, 8.5, $9 million per. I don't think Bo's going to be a perennial 50-goal scorer. I do think there'll be regression, but I want to see him push this year as far as it can go. And the Canucks they won't be able to afford him. And so it's unfortunate for Bo. Drafted by the Canucks, raised a family here, the captain of this organization, and through no fault of his own, he's been squeezed because of mismanagement and so many bloated contracts elsewhere. But wouldn't that be something to see him at the trade deadline, pack his bags, and drive to Seattle rather than getting on a flight to join some other team somewhere across the continent would be something. And look, the Kraken, they start from a position where they didn't have bad contracts, so they can take on. They're in a position where it looked a couple of weeks ago like maybe they were slipping right out of things, but turned it back in the right direction again here. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens. And Bo Horvat is a Kraken. Yeah. Maybe.
And as you say, logistically so easy. Seattle's got some cap space, and you can imagine the Horvat family just, get a place or in the hotel in Seattle for a few months and then make your decision in the offseason in terms of where to sign. Marvelous stuff, Jeff. Thank you for this. We'll catch up with you Wednesday.
All right, guys. Thanks.